Hey, it's Larry. Welcome to Stewarding the Wealth Transfer. Just got back from a great cruise with my mom and my brother and some other friends that came along, and it was really cool getting to go to Alaska. That's the fourth time that I've got to take my mom on a cruise, and about every other year we've averaged since she became a widow. So I got to read a lot, and I was reading about what Kim Clement said, and that kind of inspired me to write the book, The Parable of the Dinar and Stewarding the Wealth Transfer, which is the name of this channel. And I actually found myself really stirred because I saw crazy things that he said. And I actually thought about doing kind of a silly channel, a silly video today of just talking about some of the crazy things that he said that haven't happened yet, because I do believe they're going to happen. But that Kim Clement said that Mike Tyson is going to be an evangelist, and that Stephen King is going to become a Christian writer of Christian literature. I mean, I think that's just like the craziest thing. He said other people as well. But one of my favorite people I follow on YouTube right now is Jordan Peterson. He's brilliant, a Canadian. He's a professor, I think in Toronto, if I'm right. I love what he has to say. And he only recently came to Christ. And he's a brilliant guy, a little bit like Russell Brand. Now, Russell is not so much my thing, but he's an influencer that really has a lot of influence, and he really is fiery on his more traditional conservative views. And these guys are both coming, to the right from the left, and I really like it. And another guy is Joe Rogan. I don't follow him, but I pay attention to him. I'm not saying that he's a Christian. I don't know that he's not, but I think he fears God now. And people are giving credibility to these things. So I believe that God is going to bring more highly influential people, and I think it's going to be shocking. I saw also that Kim Clement talked about a lot of shocking people who are going to die. He talked about visiting. God said, I'm getting tired of the little guy in North Korea, Kim Jong-un, and I'm going to make a visit. And you can tell by the context of the conversation that Kim Jong-un is going to die in it. But what's really interesting is he said that when that happens, it's going to be a sign. And you might go, well, what's the sign? It's a sign that God is going to reveal the person who is going to bring down a number of giants that have been over America. The giant of socialism, the giant of human secularism, the giant of debt in America. God has raised up his David, and it's pretty clear if you study Kim Clement that when he talks often about his David, you may not like it if you don't like Trump, but that's who he's talking about. But anyway, it's a sign when Kim Jong-un is going to pass that he said, my David is about ready to re-emerge. And re-emerge is a really interesting word. So I think that's kind of shocking. There's another prophecy that I was reminded of. I'm sure you've heard it. Many people have talked about it. That when people say we have two presidents. Well, I think that we have two, but I don't think the world thinks that we have two. I think the world is confused about it. But what was really interesting is I reread that prophecy. If you reread it, it says it's going to happen in the spring. It says, I'm going to tell you this, and in the spring, I'm going to make great exposure. And you're going to learn things. And guess what? There's a month left of spring in this year. And then that brings us to summer. And I talked last week about it, but as I reread this prophecy, he said, hey, I want you to be watching the price of gold. That one thing, I want you to watch the price of gold. And it's an indicator of what God's going to do with the wealth transfer when he's going to raise. And so he said, watch the price of gold. And you probably know that gold has gone up a whole bunch, and you might have gone up so much you might think, I don't know if I should buy any. But, I'm more of a fan of silver. I've been buying it. I plan on buying more with other proceeds. But Kim Clement said, hey, watch the price of gold. It's going to be interesting. He said that's going to be in the summer. Watch the price of gold. Well, the summer starts in 4 weeks. I think it's going to be really interesting what happens. And so those are the kind of things I was starting to watch. And then I began to be fascinated about, I saw these things. I ended up looking up in House of Destiny, August, September, and October. I just happened to notice that there's this theme of crazy things that happen when because he has tons of prophecies about what happens in September, August, September, October. And I didn't really like what I saw. And it kind of makes me, it almost sets me back a little bit to, you remember when I was like, I'm a little frustrated about what I believe that God is showing that's coming. But what's really interesting, I saw one August, September, October that said, hey, what's going to happen is total pandemonium. I mean, you're going to see terrorists. You're going to see people arrested. There's going to be great exposure. That's what's coming in August, September, October. But then I saw another one that was from a different time, a different year. It said August, September, October is going to be the greatest times ever. The economy is going to begin to boom. So, that can just be really frustrating. And you can go, well, that's so contradictory. But what if those 2-3 month periods are not at the same year? What if you laid these ideas over the concept that I talked about, that Chris Reeves talked about? And, a number of prophetic voices have said, hey, I see things, Chris Reeves talked about it started at the eclipse and it intensifies over the summer. And then in the fall, it gets really, kind of crazy, he talked about. And then he talked about Trump wouldn't really be the president until probably July of next year, and we're going to have really a rough year next year. And then he saw good things happen. Well, if you kind of lay over what I saw with that time frame, it didn't fall apart. In fact, it all kind of started making sense. And so you go, well, so that means that this August, September, October, if you're right, Larry, and, I don't know that I'm right, but I'm actually pretty comfortable at it. And if I'm wrong, does it mean I'm wrong because I'm advocating a view of what Kim Clement saw? I feel like I'm trying to handle it. I'm not elevating it to the point of, worshiping it or whatever, but I feel like it's worth studying. I mean, history books are worth studying, and I feel like, prophetic words are worth studying. And so it makes sense, though, when I put it these two ways. So I feel like August, September, October are going to be really gnarly. And, I started thinking about other words that people have given about, because I've talked to you about how I actually had, honestly, I've had my own prophetic experiences, not a lot of them, but a dozen or so. And one of them was fighting in the streets. That's not rare. I mean, a lot of people have had different, visions or dreams about that. And I remember one that really struck me, or a couple that have really struck me. There's kind of this theme of where they're talking about they're not having their entitlements, and they're mad because the government's not giving them money. And then it reminded me of this Kim Clement word that I thought maybe the craziest thing that I read is he was actually talking about the big E, which I think I'm pretty convinced now is the final well there's 8 wells that Kim Clement talks about, and I really began to understand the timing of what order they come in. And I believe that Brixton Metals, BBB, is going to have to follow metals, precious metals. And I know I'm bouncing around a little bit here, but he talked about Brixton Metals, and then he talked about 2 crowns, but he goes, oh, wait, in the middle of that is when Apple iPhone is going to kind of really lose market share, and a competitor is really going to make great gains. Like, what? So in my brain, I'm thinking about it. I'm going, man, if we're told to watch gold this summer, if this happens to be the summer, and it looks like it is because it's gone up like 25%, I believe 22% since the beginning of the year. I mean, gold has really gone from under 2,000 to over 2,400. That's a big gain for 5 months. And so if gold goes up like that, then the miners, the gold miners, the silver miners, they're going to go. That's what Brixton Metals is. It still really hasn't moved very much. It's still under 10 cents. The biggest and most well-known miners are $30, and they're planning on a 30x move. And so people are thinking if gold goes crazy, those things could go to $1,000. Well, I mean, and that's not unprecedented. I mean, miners sometimes move 40x. So that could put miners at $1,200. But if you buy BBB at 10 cents right now, and then it really hits the mother lode, that's crazy. But the crazy thing is that he tells us, Kim Clement tells us, that between the time of Brixton Metals and 2 crowns, which we don't know what that is, that's when Apple really has a big setback. So it's really interesting that Kim Clement has these crazy unfulfilled prophecies that tie them to months, they tie them to seasons, and they even tie them to wells of blessing and the wealth transfer. And as I began to understand that, I feel like I'm going to leave you with this crazy thing. So he talks a lot about Big E, and that's 5 different kinds of new fuel that are going to be coming into prominence. They're going to come into prominence in the spring. It's like in March, he talks about that they're going to come into prominence. So they're not coming into prominence this year. Have you heard about a new fuel, 5 new fuel sources that come from microbes in dirt and garbage and from seawater? No, that hasn't happened yet because that hasn't been revealed. That's, I believe, is going to happen next year. But what Kim Clement said is, he goes, there's a 14-month time from the time you hear about it and you need to invest in it until the time it comes into being. And he goes, I want you to invest in it, and if you want to do well, you can invest in this Big E. And he said the most interesting thing. He goes, if you want to invest in it, I'm going to tell you the markets are going to open. Wall Street is going to open. Even the Nasdaq is going to be open. He goes, well, I've never heard of them closing. I mean, I know that they've closed in history for a day or two, but he's like, hey, church, do you want to, hey, people of God, do you want to be blessed? The markets are going to be open. Well, that doesn't make any sense to us. Except it's going to make sense. And I started thinking, man, how could that make sense? And then I thought, what if this correction of when the Dow drops below 20,000, which he talks about many times, what if that happens this year, this summer? Gold is going to rise this summer. He said, watch the price of gold. What if, if the dollar falls apart, gold is really going to rise? Because, gold in your hand, the dollar is going to go down and gold is really going to go up because people are going to be throwing dollars into gold, and they can actually even reevaluate gold. So what if Wall Street crashed so hard that what if things like AMC and GameStop and people who are naked shorting on Donald Trump's stock and the other ones, what if those short sellers were actually caught and made to pay? You know who would pay the biggest is Vanguard and State Street and BlackRock and Blackstone. Those companies would be stuck because I feel like they're behind the scenes, and then there's market makers and stuff in the stock market. But man, if the stock market froze and actually closed, and Kim Clement's word actually only makes sense if they actually close apparently for weeks, maybe months. But if you were God and you wanted to bring blessings to your people, and they're in a system of debt and dominance, and they're under the weight of just taxes and oppression, we're almost like we're kind of slaves, And so that's what I'm coming to think. I'm wondering if this year, in just a few months, we might see gold skyrocket. We might see the market correction that I've talked about that will initiate the dinar. That would be the market dropping to 20,000. Maybe it goes down so hard it doesn't open up for a long time. I mean, that's what it sounds to me like that Kim Clement says. I'm just trying to tie things together. But then he talks about how all hell's going to break loose and he actually talks about demonic influences. I mean, there's spirits that are stirring up trouble and turmoil. He actually uses the word pandemonium. For an August, September, October. The next year, he says August, September, October are going to be financially amazing. And he says, America, your best days are ahead. And that's in the context of that. Another thing I remember, and I'm, throwing out a lot of the things here, I remember reading about during this bank failure that he talks about. You may go, well, this is a 2005 prophecy. It only applies to 2008. I don't think so. Because he said during this bank failure, he goes, 3 media companies are going to have a Damascus Road experience. They're actually going to begin to start telling the truth. And you and I both know that hasn't happened yet. I mean, we don't get the news. We get a narrative. And I think that's going to change. Kim Clement said that's going to change. He said that's going to change on the other side of the bank failure. And he said that the news, 3 big networks are going to start telling the truth. Well, that sure hasn't happened yet. So I'm actually really excited because he said that the Spirit of God is going to begin to be poured out during this August, September, and October. Because if you're like me, I remember what Bob Jones said about the Kansas City Chiefs. I think they've won 3 times. I've been so excited that they won, and I'm like, oh, where's the Spirit of God? Well, I mean, he's still here. I feel him to a degree. Not like this. I feel him. Sometimes this, but usually sometimes like this. And then, oh, they won again. It's going to be a big deal. No, that's not. Well, I don't think that Bob Jones was wrong. And I don't think Kim Clement's going to be wrong. But I have not liked the timing. But now I kind of have an image in my head of how kind of it all makes sense. And I think it's time to buckle up, Skippy, because I think it's going to get rough, but I think it's going to be amazing. And I saw testimonies, I saw statements, I saw really one. I'm going to actually have to talk about them in the future, about how Kim Clement describes the outpouring of God that's coming. So from a spiritual perspective, what's coming is absolutely amazing because God has been preparing us for 4 years and really, for our whole lifetimes. And there's going to be an outpouring that's going to be so wonderful, and I'm so excited about it. But what's going on here is we're in the middle of a spiritual preparation with financial consequences, and I found myself wanting to make it, and you might find yourself wrestling with the same thing. Are you wrestling with making this, is this in the forefront of your mind, a financial opportunity with spiritual implications? No, it's a spiritual situation, a spiritual opportunity with financial implications. It's the finances are not the main thing. But God is looking for people to be blessed. He's looking for people of faith. He's looking for people with a destiny. He's looking for people with a calling. He's looking for people who aren't satisfied. And I think it's going to be absolutely wonderful. So I'm really getting excited. And so I wonder what's going to happen this summer. I think, and he said, watch gold, because there's going to be a tremendous transfer of wealth during these summer months. I think during the same time these absolute crazy things are happening, all hell is going to break loose, and all heaven is going to break loose at the same time. And I really think that that's what's going to happen. And so people who are prepared and people who steward these times are going to do well. And then it's going to be very scary times for even those who are prepared. But it's not time to lose faith. It's not time to not know who our confidence is in. So interesting times. That's kind of what I've come to the conclusion. I'll be talking more about it. Interesting one. I hope you can tell and sense my optimism, but it's not a time for optimism. It's a time for reality, full of faith. That's what I think. Have a good day. We'll be in touch.